The Chiefs have won the Super Bowl, but their victory is bittersweet as renewed protest challenges their team name. More on this coming up.
Representative Patola supports military action against an unknown aircraft in American U.S. airspace. More on that story coming up.
Last week, the Sioux Tribe versus United States started its opening hearings regarding fair and just law enforcement practices on their reservation. More on the beginning trial coming up. Welcome to Good Morning Indian Country. I'm Allison Levering.
And I'm Cole Brinks Plenty. Glad to have you with us this morning. We have lots of great things to share this Wednesday, February 15th, as we highlight news and information from all over Indian Country. This project is supported in part by the University of Kansas and the William Allen White School of Journalism and Mass Communications, and donations by viewers like you. Northern Arizona's university plans to invest $10 million in a new initiative to support Indigenous faculty and staff. Now announced it's received a $5 million grant from the Mellon Foundation to develop and implement the 7 Generations Signature Initiative over the next 3 years. To make the initiative even more transformative, the Flagstaff-based University Foundation matched the grant by contributing another $5 million. The 7GSI proposal was inspired by NOW's commitment to Indigenous peoples, and which is articulated in NOW's strategic plan, NOW 2025, elevating excellence. In recognition of the unique sovereign status of Native nations and the sacred land on which the university was built. NOW will continue its international support for Indigenous students, faculty, and staff, develop campus-wide culturally responsive education, and build mutually beneficial partnerships with Indigenous communities that will position NOW as the nation's leading university serving Indigenous peoples.
Protesters demanded the National Football League abolish race-based mascots and imagery, taking their disapproval to State Farm Stadium, where Super Bowl 57 was played on Sunday. The Philadelphia Eagles and Kansas City Chiefs played on the NFL's largest stage in front of a sold-out crowd of 64,300 live spectators and millions of television viewers around the world. The protest was organized to challenge Kansas City to abandon the team's name and mascot, the Chiefs, as well as the organization's fan-driven Tomahawk Chop. A group of approximately 100 people marched through the Westgate Entertainment District to one of the entrances of the State Farm Stadium. Bystanders were seen mocking protesters and mimicking the Tomahawk Chop and dancing in the street, laughing at the group of largely Indigenous women who attended the protest. In 2020, the Chiefs banned fans from donning headdresses, war paint, and clothing at the Arrowhead Stadium. Those rules were not in effect at the Super Bowl, as the Chiefs fans were seen walking through the crowd holding a replica of Northern Plains Tribe's headdress. Using Native American mascots and imagery has been found to be harmful to Native people, according to the American Psychological Society.
Representative Patola praises Department of Defense for shooting down unidentified object over Arctic Circle. Representative Mary Sattler Patola issued a statement on Friday after the Biden administration announced the U.S. Department of Defense shot down an unidentified object termed a high-altitude object over the Arctic Circle in Alaska around 9:45 Alaskan time, 1:45 p.m. Eastern. Patola, who is the first Alaska Native to serve in Congress, is the at-large member of the House of Representatives. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said from the White House on Friday, said the object was flying at 40,000 feet that posed a responsible threat to the safety of civilian flight. The object was first spotted on Thursday night when the military became aware of the object's usage of ground-based radar. The military then sent an F-35 jet to observe it and determined the object was not manned. Friday's shot down of the object came less than a week after the military shot down a Chinese spy balloon off the coast of South Carolina over the Atlantic Ocean. Last week, a federal court in South Dakota began hearing opening arguments in a case that will determine if the federal government is providing adequate law enforcement to one of the nation's largest Indian reservations. In a complaint filed on July 26, 2022, the Oglala Sioux Tribe asserted the federal government has failed to uphold its trust responsibility to the tribe by providing adequate law enforcement on the 2.1 million acre Pine Ridge Reservation. The complaint was later amended in October 2022. Chief Judge Roberto A. Lang heard in our opening statements and arguments over 2 full days in trial at the Andrew W. Bogue Federal Building and U.S. Courthouse in Rapid City. Guala Sioux Tribal President Frank Starr Comes Out was scheduled to hold a press conference after the trial to discuss the merits of the case, specifically how the United States government's failure to keep their treaty promises has created a crisis of murdered and missing Indigenous women on Pine Ridge.
A U.S. judge on Monday handed down a mixed ruling in the highly contested Thacker Pass lithium mine case. The ruling upheld the Bureau of Land Management's decision to approve the Thacker Pass lithium mine in northern Nevada, but ordered the BLM to review the mining claims Lithium Americas, the company developing the mine, has in accordance with a 19th century law that governs mining on public lands. BLM, which issued a permit for the mine in 2020, had faced legal challenges from conservation organizations, a local rancher, and several tribes to stop the project. U.S. District Court Judge Miranda M. Dew wrote in her order on Monday that the court affirms BLM's decision, rejecting arguments that the project will cause unnecessary and undue degradation to the local sage-grouse population and habitat, groundwater aquifers, and air quality in violation of federal land policy. In oral arguments on January 5, 2023, attorneys for the plaintiff said that the BLM failed to fully analyze the mine's impacts on the environment and did not fully consult with the tribes. The court disagreed and cited that BLM reasonably consulted with the Burns Paiute tribe and Reno Sparks Indian tribe. Last week, it was reported that the automakers General Motors in investing $65 million in Lithium Americas if it cleared the permit.
Coming up, a new exhibit at Watkins celebrates Haskell history.
The Watkins Museum of History debuted a new exhibit covering the history of Haskell Indian Nations University. Sophia Nash is here to tell us more about the event.
So Watkins Museum knew we wanted to have this space available to tell stories of Haskell. And so what we knew was we couldn't be the people who are leading that story.
Within the exhibit, there are many different pieces of Haskell history, including this traditional headdress, a band uniform, and the school's original crest. It took the two curators in partnership with Haskell's Cultural Center 1 year to gather research and get the exhibit ready for its debut in December.
Haskell Cultural Center in the Watkins had lots of photographs. So that was, I also like photographs too, it's real nice, but I was trying to do as many three-dimensional things as possible, which they didn't have as much, so that kind of helped narrow down the search.
Haskell's been in Lawrence since 1884. This exhibit showcases the different changes Haskell has gone through since its opening, while also including information that even Lawrence residents might not know.
The From Then to Now exhibit will be displayed until the end of March. The Watkins Museum of History is open Tuesday through Saturday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m.
For more information about the exhibit, check out Watkins' website and make sure to keep an eye out for an official Final Friday debut at the end of the month. Coming up, Jason Swartley talks about some of the politics behind the Super Bowl protest. Jason Swartley is...
Jason Swartley is the Director of Food and Pantry Emergency Services at the Kansas City Indian Center. He is an enrolled member of the Santee Sioux Tribe of Nebraska. So Jason Swartley, what is Not in Our Honor and how did it get started?
Yeah, Not in Our Honor is kind of an organized movement. There have been protests ongoing against the Kansas City football team, really about as long as it's been in existence. But the Not in Our Honor Coalition was founded by Rhonda Lavaldo, a professor at Haskell, back in the 90s, just to kind of organize that effort.
Yeah. So how long have you been a part of the Not in Our Honor?
Not in Our Honor has been partnering with the Kansas City Indian Center for several years now. And so probably at least 7 or 8 years, we have been out joining Rhonda and her group out at the stadium every Sunday.
So how did you become a part of Not in Our Honor?
Really, for me personally, it was just out of a desire to see change, a recognition of the harm that's being caused by the stereotypes propagated by the team. And I think all that, kind of the center as a whole, really all of our staff and our board of directors feel strongly that this is something we need to be a part of.
Yeah. Okay. So the Washington Commanders changed their name a few years ago. Is this possible for the Kansas City team?
Oh, certainly. You know, and no one thought that was going to be possible either. Yeah. Their owner, Dan Snyder, famously once remarked that he would never, and he said, put that in all caps, never change the name of the team. And ultimately, it was purely financial reasons they did what they did. It was their sponsors, their corporate partners coming together and saying, after during the George Floyd era, saying that they were tired of this. They were tired of being associated with what was, a dictionary-defined racial slur, and it looked bad for their company. And so, is that possible? Certainly. I think certainly there are a lot of corporations partnering with the Kansas City Football Club. People whose name is on the building, for instance, who have been eerily silent about the racial stereotyping happening inside that stadium, and I think it'd be really interesting to hear from some of those folks.
So, as you may know, the 57th Super Bowl has happened this past weekend, and I know Not in Our Honor did a protest. So, what effect did that protest have on the Super Bowl?
Well, we partnered with Amanda Blackhorse, who's kind of a nationwide activist who was kind of instrumental in the efforts against the Washington football team, and also helped with a number of efforts across the country, along with Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient Suzanne Harjo. They've done tremendous things just across the country raising awareness about this issue. So Amanda actually lives in Phoenix, and so she was able to help organize on that end, and so it was very well done, very well orchestrated. She was able to gather a pretty sizable crowd. We were able to march down right outside the stadium, and we were there about 2.5 hours.
Okay. So, do you feel like the events like the Super Bowl bring awareness to the problem or make it worse?
Well, honestly, it's a little of both. I mean, they do, this was the world stage, so there were a number of media outlets, local, both here in Kansas City and in Philadelphia, that picked up the story and had some really good things to say. National organizations as well. AP ran a story, Reuters ran a story that was new. So we received a lot of coverage, and I think that makes it very interesting for Kansas City, for citizens that live here, for our city council, to see that that's the kind of representation our city is getting. Not just across the country but around the world. That's what people are starting to associate more and more with our city. Not barbecue, not the City of Fountains. It's just throngs of people chopping along to that stupid song. And I think we as Kansas City, everyone, not just Indigenous people, need to take a minute and ask, is that really the picture we want people to have? And so in that way, it was good to get this kind of exposure on the issue. It was also bad in that it emboldens those people that love stereotyping, that love dressing up and playing Indian. We, the Kansas City team likes to pat themselves on the back that they no longer allow headdresses and face paint at the stadium. We sure saw face paint and headdresses walking into the Super Bowl, though. And so that does not solve the problem. That still happens here in Kansas City, everywhere but the stadium. And so it's still a problem, and it needs to be addressed.
So off that, what are the long-term solutions for organizations like Not in Our Honor towards the institutions like the NFL?
Well, I think we can take examples from those that have fallen before. We look at what happened with the Washington Football Club. We look at what happened with the Cleveland baseball team. Really, it was largely not those organizations responsible for making the change. It's outside influences, it's corporate partners, it's people within the organization, it's companies associated, it's the citizens of that area, being more vocal. And so, we do get people walking by when we're out protesting saying, hey, I hope they do it, we're on your side. Well, tell someone that, tell someone other than that. We don't need to hear that, the team needs to hear that. Your dollars say that a lot more than just your voice does. So companies in the Kansas City area can do a lot. People, if your company is doing something that you feel is wrong, if they're, having a big team-themed party and everyone's tomahawk chopping and you feel that that's wrong, say something. There's a lot of things that just individuals can do just by using your voice.
What does the infamous tomahawk chop mean to you, and how does it dishonor Native Americans?
Well, if you look at the tomahawk chop, that is just that's the crudest stereotype left now, and that's what all the teams do. Florida State does it, Kansas City does it, the Atlanta baseball team does that. That is, that's music that is not Native music. That's really a parody that someone wrote of what they thought Native American music sounded like. That motion is just a stereotype. You'll never see an actual Native person pull out their tomahawk and start chopping along rhythmically to a drum beat. So it's just a ridiculous, demeaning, degrading, dehumanizing stereotype of indigenous people. And honestly, it's shocking that we're here in 2023 and we're still having to have that conversation with people.
Yeah. With that being said, is there any more that you would like to add?
Really just to emphasize again, once again, everyone can do something. You know, if you feel strongly about this issue, if you'd like to see this kind of representation, not just of Native people, but of your community here in the greater Kansas City area, say something, you know, and you can definitely become involved in our group. We have a petition online at endracismkc.org. You can sign that and really just speak up within your organization, whether it be a school, whether it be a company. Speak to your friends and family when you see them doing and participating in things that you believe are wrong.
Thank you once again for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for talking about the issues. Thank you once again for coming on the show, telling us more about some of these issues. We'll be back after this break.
Coming up, new stark health statistics and indigenous art being showcased in the NFL.
Stay tuned.
In a grim new statistic, Native Americans experienced the highest increase of suicide deaths in the nation from 2020 to 2021, according to a report published last week by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. According to the new report, after a 2-year decline, suicide deaths in the United States increased overall by 4.79% between 2020 and 2021. Between 2018 and 2021, increases in age-adjusted suicide rates were highest among Native Americans at the 26%, followed Black Americans 19.2% and Hispanics 6.8%. The report considered age, race, and ethnicity related trends between 2018 and 2021. As well as the data shows a decline in white suicide deaths by 3.6%. Previous reports indicate Native Americans experienced higher suicide rates compared to all other racial groups and ethnic groups in the United States. Suicide is the leading cause of death for Indian Americans and Alaska Natives across all ages. The suicide rate for Native youth is 2.5 times higher than the overall national average, making the rates the highest across all ethnic and racial groups. If you or someone close to you is having suicidal thoughts, dial the 988 Suicide Crisis Lifeline, which provides 24/7 free and confidential support.
Indigenous clothing designers are reaching new heights as featured brands in this year's NFL's Origins collection. The OXDX clothing and Not Afraid were 2 of 4 clothing brands chosen by the NFL's signature merchandise program that features designers that have ties to the Arizona region. Designers Jared Yazzie and Ellie Stone of the OXDX and Elias Jade, Not Afraid, designed signature t-shirts, hoodies, magnets, and other merchandise such as water bottles, art prints, bandanas that went on sale this week during the run-up to Super Bowl. Inclusions of indigenous culture and representation at this year's Super Bowl has reached a visibility unseen at the previous 56 championship games, including the official game ticket, a pre-game land acknowledgement, a Cherokee Nation citizen who will serve as a game official, and many other displays of Native heritage and talent. While the NFL is increasing efforts to support diversity in the organization through various accelerator programs, there is one key issue remaining in the organization for many indigenous people: the Kansas City football team's history of the use of Native imagery and mascots. Here's a roundup of other news released from Washington, D.C. this past week that impacts Indian country.
Indian Affairs releases new guidance for determining eligibility for organization under the Alaskan Indian Reorganization Act. The Office of the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs today announced the new policy guidance to clarify the criteria and procedures for evaluating petitions under the organization under the Alaskan Indian Reorganization Act.
Senators Padilla and Feinstein introduced legislation to place land into trust for Paula Band of Mission Indians last week. U.S. Senator Alex Padilla, Dianne Feinstein, both Democratic California, introduced the Paula Band of Mission Indians Land Transfer Act of 2023, which would place approximately 720 acres of ancestral lands in San Diego County that are adjacent to the Paula Band of Mission Indians' existing reservation into trust for the tribe.
FCC solicitation for comments on broadband due February 21st. For Federal Communications Commission announced on December 22nd, 2022, comment dates for the notice of proposed rulemaking on preventing digital discrimination. The NPRM seeks comment on proposals to facilitate equitable access to broadband internet services.
Thanks for watching this year's second episode of Good Morning Indian Country.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. We'll see you next Wednesday.